There we go. Well, welcome everyone to the next in our series of career talks. I'm very glad to welcome you here tonight to this excellent talk on retail, and we've got a wonderful selection of panelists for you to listen to. Just a brief bit of housekeeping to start with. If you have any questions as we go through, please do pop them in the Q&A. We will be addressing those at the end, so just put them in as you think of them and we'll come back to those later. If you want to say hi, please do so in the chat. It's nice to hear from people there. This session is being recorded, so if you do have to leave for any reason, you will be able to catch it on our website and YouTube page afterwards. So I think that's pretty much it from me to start with. Mags, over to you.
Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, evening, or morning. My name is Mags, Magnavai. If I hear Magnavai, it's usually my mother, and I've done something really bad with Mags. It's fine. I do several things in the wine world, one of which is educating. I teach WSET 1, 2, and 3 at Bermondsey, as well as import and retail wine into the UK. We're joined by a wonderful selection of panelists. So rather than me trying to introduce everybody and just absolutely ruin the pronunciation of your name, which is not too bad today, I'll let you guys, I'll let you guys and girls introduce yourself. We'll start with you, Anne. Kind of, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Tell us who you are, what you do, how long you've been doing it for. That's a little bit of a flavor.
Great. So I'm Anne Jones. I currently look after all of our kind of drinks experience for Waitrose. So we've just had a restructure. So for those of you who don't know, Waitrose is a UK premium retailer with a huge overtrade in wine, beers and spirits. So it's not just wine, it's across all drinks. I started off actually on the shop floor while I had a separate career as a singer, oddly, which I still have a little bit of a sideline in that space. But so while I was doing my finals, I started on the shop floor. And ended up then doing the thing lots of people say they want to do, but I'm sure we'll talk a little bit later about how it works and indeed doesn't work. Started on the shop floor, then moved into the buying team, stayed in the buying team for quite a long time. So I moved into the buying team in 2008, decided I didn't actually want to be a buyer for a variety of reasons, which again may come up in terms of sort of aptitude, skill set, and actually what that really means in the real world. I then became BWS Beers, Wines and Spirits category manager. So effectively looking after all the customer facing work that the buyers do, how we communicate that to customers, and also working with our customer insight team and working across lots and lots of different parts of the retail ecosystem. And now I have just moved into running our drinks, events and experiences team, which also looks after some of our training for partners and customers, but across both Waitrose and John Lewis. That's me really in a nutshell, a very, very small, quick nutshell.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anne. Simo, if we may come to you, sir, who are you? What do you do? How long have you done it for?
So my name is Simo. You might notice the dogs, the little one's Astra and the big one's Chester. If you do see them probably on the screen, I do apologise. So yeah, my name's Simo. I own Milroy's of Soho. It's London's oldest whisky specialist. Started in 1964 in Soho. I brought it about 5 years ago, sort of rejuvenated a little bit because it was turning into a bit of a wine shop, and then sort of brought it back into just full whiskey world. And from there I added a cocktail downstairs, and we've got a second site now in Spitalfields with a members club, another whiskey bar and shop and a cocktail bar there as well. Plus we do my own bottlings, private client stuff as well, website, we do miniatures, drams to door as well, so we've got miniature subscription services. Yeah, that's basically my business now. I started out in hospitality doing illegal bars in Shoreditch in my old house, a big warehouse as every sort of East London hipster does, and started doing illegal bars there for cash only, and decided to do it for real. So I've got a restaurant in Soho. Restaurant in Soho, and then sold that and brought Milroy's, just kind of saved my little bit of heritage in Soho because it was going down here a little bit. But yeah, before that, construction world, weirdly enough. So he's had a construction company before that. And before that, God, I was supposed to be a chemical engineer, but it just sounded a bit too boring and long. So I decided to get in booze instead. It's much more fun.
But then if you're like me, you then start the MW and the boring and long evaporates.
Yeah, you come out of school with the best intentions, and then you're suddenly like, oh, booze is so good, and then you realize it's actually a really good liquid made out of it if you do it right.
Yeah, it's just about when you get bitten by that bug, because I found that once you go down that pathway, there is just no exercising it. It's just, you can't.
Oh no, you can either, when you go in booze, you either go that way, or you realize what's going on behind the bar and you actually fall in love with it. And you go that route, which is why we're all here today. It is an incredible business, very creative, very lovely, and we get to work with some of the best liquids on the planet. So,
fantastic, thank you.
Whiskey
so much.
being the best, obviously, no offense to anybody else.
Thank you, Simo. That's really interesting. And before I come to you, Emily, just for the purposes of today, we're obviously talking about wine retail, wines, beers, and spirits retail. And retail is, anything. It could be, retail online. It could be subscription. It could be walking into a shop. So we're going to kind of hope to touch and cover kind of all of that in an hour and a half. We'll give it a go. So to kind of guide our parameters. And if I may come to you, Emily.
Hi. Yeah. Sorry. Can you hear me? Okay.
Course, yeah.
Perfect, good. Sorry, I dropped out for a minute. I've had my husband running around me with internet cables trying to sort out our connection, but I think we're sorted now. So I didn't hear the question, but from everyone else's responses, I think it's to tell you a little bit about what I do. And
yes, please.
Perfect. So I work at the Oxford Wine Company. We're an independent wine and spirit merchant. We're fairly large. We've got sort of 4 different shops and a wholesale arm as well. We stock wines, beers, spirits across 2,000 different SKUs, ranging from sort of £8 a bottle up to £800 a bottle. My personal journey, I went to university. I didn't really know what to do afterwards, found myself waitressing, and then got bitten by the wine bug. Started doing WSET courses, found myself working at the Oxford Wine Company, and now I've somehow find myself on the MW course as well. So I've kind of well and truly been bitten, let's say.
Fantastic, thank you so much, Emily. If we may come to you, come back to you, Simo, in no particular order. You kind of mentioned your journey. Were there any key kind of decisions, turning points in your career that kind of you would say cemented where you are today? Any kind of highlights, or tell us, give us a few.
Yeah, I mean, having the illegal bar sort of started with the creativity of sort of making cocktails, and that's how I really fell in love with that. Before that, you just kind of see a menu at a bar, and you're like, oh, it just tastes nice, it tastes nice, it tastes nice, and you don't really realize that, especially not our cocktail bars, it takes sort of about 3 or 4 months to develop a drink or a menu. Mm-hmm. And of course, when we started doing my illegal bars, these bartenders were coming in and just kind of go, oh, that's actually really, there is a bit of there's science behind it. The fun kind of science, obviously, but, viscosities and all sorts, and how you sort of balance liquids and esters and aromas within the liquids that come out. And I suppose that got me into the booze industry. The whiskey one was, I actually remember the exact bottle. It was, I was in Milroy's, was supplying, I used to run a restaurant in Wardour Street, and Milroy's was supplying my sort of whiskey. And I went in there, and it was about 5 years ago, tried a 1989 Bunnahabhain 14-year-old from Carnmore, an independent bottler. When the independent bottlers weren't really big in the whiskey world around about sort of 5 years ago, they've sort of just come into the market, and it was sort of cheaper, single cask, limited release, and it sort of blew my mind that the market didn't have many of these in it. And so that's when I sort of, that's it, I'm buying Milroy's, learn about the history. The Milroy's brothers were the guys that brought single malt Scotch to London. Before then it was all blends. They're the first ones to do it. They're first ones to go to Japan, take single malt over there as well. So that's the sort of key moments for me. And when I brought Milroy's, I just had this sort of desire to bring it back to what it was in the 60s, just bring those independently cool source bottles, like the other 2 ladies on the call here. We're there to source amazing bottles and give it to our customers. And it's what we do in Milroy's, regardless of what spirits industry you work in. Our job is to get the best to the customers. We do all the hard work, tasting thousands and thousands of whiskies. I've got 300 whiskies in my bar in Soho. I've got thousands, in about 1,200 in Spitalfields. My shop has about 400 or 500 bottles of whiskey on it. Ecom's about 2,000, so, but we have to source every single one. And, like Emily was saying, that's the really fun job, and just kind of bringing that passion, this is so good, I tried it. There you go.
Yeah.
You know, in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Anne, kind of, you talked about working your way from, you know, shop floor. Interestingly enough, I used to work at Waitrose as well. I started my wine career in Waitrose, and I did my time. So, you know, from shop floor to buyer to now looking after events, what was the thought process behind it? You know, what were the key turning points?
Yeah, well, whether there was any, I'm not sure that anyone actually gets into the wine trade on purpose.
Agreed.
I think it's a series of sort of happy accidents. I mean, funnily enough, it was when I was 11 I first wrote a school project about wine labels. I mean,
Okay.
why
That's
on
early.
earth I picked wine labels of the Loire Valley to write about at the age of 11 is still beyond everyone. Got no idea. But I was actually heading down a career as a musician. And to be honest, the real fundamental decision that moved me into wine was a realization that I absolutely hated teaching. And most people in the music industry sing or have a career as a musician, and then they teach on the side.
Mhm.
And I needed some extra money, and the teaching was just not working for me.
Not doing it. Yeah.
No, and I needed some extra money, and there was a big Waitrose opening, and I thought, give that a go. And I'd been in the wine society at uni. I'd kind of been engaged in wine, and for me, that it was the discipline of wine and the fact that it's got, you know, history, it's got social studies, it's got economics, it's got chemistry, it's got physics. So I started off in wine, and then I fell in love with spirits as well. And then also on the shop floor, normal Waitrose job, but then got really involved with our wine specialists and talking about wine, and also doing kind of local events, and just I started to really love that engagement with the consumer. And then I moved into the wine buying team, which was, I think that was quite fundamental, because that's when I thought, okay, this is a career now. This is not a sideline. This is it.
I'm doing this now. I'm in this.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in this. And actually, I remember in the interview talking about the balance of analysis and creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that it's that balance that I've always loved, where you have to be good at numbers, you have to understand how to run a P&L, you have to get that, but actually you also have to be able to communicate and engage and inspire, because actually when it comes down to it, and don't smack me down for this, but most bottles to a generic customer look kind of the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so actually you have to somehow be able to, and in a supermarket environment that is really difficult.
It's tough. Yeah.
So that challenge, and I love a problem and I love a challenge. And I think that's where I got really excited, and to see what I could do. And that's when I started doing that within and from the buying team, just kind of representing what those buyers do and trying to understand how we can move towards something that's a bit more experiential. Hence where I've now ended up, where we're doing, you know, we did 650, nearly 700 events since COVID hit.
Okay.
So we're just running, and it's tastings, it's specialists, and it's almost trying to understand how to make that something that's commercially viable in a big retail environment. So it's that challenge and that sort of sitting on the fence almost between two very different disciplines. That's actually what I've always loved. And I say this I had to tell them the other day, I think all jobs, you find your passion and you get the product knowledge, but actually all jobs are about problem solving effectively. So it's resilience and problem solving, and they're the things that I think have been the threads all the way through that kind of career plan for me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And that was so rich in context. I was really desperately trying to hang on to one or two keywords, which I wanted to kind of go back into, because going back to what Simo said, and one of the words which you mentioned, Simo, if I may borrow, you mentioned passion, having a passion, and, you know, right at the end there, and you reiterated that, you mentioned that again. Just having something which, you know, you're really keen to get involved in. And then you came back, the other point which you mentioned is being kind of analytical, you know. Throughout retail, you're going to need to do that. You know, different bottles, it's slightly different in the spirits world, where you've got different bottles, fancy labels, fancy packaging. Whereas in the wine world, like you mentioned, there are about 4 or 5 main types of bottles. And so it's what makes this customer pick up this bottle versus that bottle in a retail environment. Or if it's online, how do you sell a story? How do you capture an event? And how do you capture someone's, you know, attention? Because in terms of shopping online, people spend less than 30 seconds reading or looking at a label. So how do you, in those 30 seconds, tell them what you want to tell them? And why do they pick that one wine over, for example, if you're Simo, 2,000 other SKUs which you've got? So it is a healthy challenge, if nothing else. Simo, did you want to mention something?
No, just yeah. Annoyingly, because I have to put mute on, I have to do this every time. Because I haven't got my iPad that I'm working off. So, and sorry about the dog; she keeps popping in there all the time.
All good.
It's a little puppy.
Emily, if we may come to you, so key decisions. You mentioned kind of going to uni. We you and I probably sit at two vastly different ends of the spectrum. In that, I knew I wasn't going to go into uni quite early on, so it was a case of go down, work, and figure out my life. But you kind of went into uni, did other things. What were the key decisions that led Emily to being where she is?
Oh Lord, I think I can certainly chime with Anne's comment about a series of happy accidents. I think I'm certainly someone that's a kind of perpetual student. I love studying, I love learning things, and so I went to university basically because I loved poetry, and I did an English degree, and that was really interesting. And then I thought, what shall I do? I kind of faffed around a bit, became a waitress, and I thought, oh, this wine thing's quite interesting. And it was really a slow burn. I can't say I had a really eureka moment that told me you must go into the wine trade. What I really do remember though, and the time when I thought it was more than just a sort of hobby or an interest and something that I might turn into a career, was actually when I did my WSET level 2. And I just remember I did it in the 3-day course, and I just remember this amazing feeling of discovery. And I was just on a high for those whole 3 days. It was so fascinating. And then I thought, I could do this as my job, and so then I started the process of moving from waitressing at kind of London cocktail bar-y type places that weren't, had wine, but didn't have a strong focus on wine, into trying to be part of the wine trade proper.
Yeah. Fab. Thank you so much, Emily. And if I may come to you, if you don't mind. Obviously, it sounds like you've been at Waitrose for quite a while, and to kind of dive into that at Waitrose and John Lewis, how have you seen the retail world evolve over your time there? What are some of the changes that you've noticed? How have the people's shopping habits changed, or the way people buy wine or spirits? What are your thoughts? How has retail changed?
Oh, I think retail's changed a huge amount, but also equally probably not as much as some of us would like. I think the last year has accelerated change, as we all know. Given the move to more online, it's certainly given our online presence a real shot in the arm. But over the last few years, I think it's been a reflection of a change in society more than anything. I think we've seen the wine industry. I do a lot of judging and speaking and interaction with the trade, and actually how that trade operates has definitely evolved. I've certainly been, I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, but I've been a lot less patronized over the last, I would say the last sort of 8 to 10 years than I was in the first 10. But I think customers have certainly grown. You see the trends that we all see. There's almost no point me mentioning the gin boom, because we all see it's there. But there's a lot of kind of reflection of buying trends, and we have to see that, and we have to see our space change. But I think for me, the most exciting and interesting opportunity that we've seen evolve over the last few years has been how much people want to actually engage. Wine it's beginning to stop being a status symbol that's just a kind of, I only buy Bordeaux. To starting to, people want to know the story and they want to understand it. And obviously sustainability is huge and complicated and dense, and that's probably one for another webinar. But I think that interest and how the interest has evolved, and now we're starting to see people really try and get to grips of what that actually means in reality for a retail and production side. I think that's really fascinating to keep an eye on.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anne. Simo, Anne mentioned a couple of points. You mentioned, the gin boom, for example, mentioned sustainability, which, in the past might still be. The spirits industry has been, it's a really good liquid, amazing liquid. The packaging is so important. We've got these big, heavy Ponty bottles. What are some of the changes which you've seen? How do you capitalize as a bar owner on some of these trends? And in the kind of end of the sustainability end of the spectrum, are you noticing any changes in terms of how spirits companies are behaving, packaging?
Yeah, absolutely. We're lucky because my business spans bars, e-com, and retail, and subscription. So we've seen massive change, especially like the whiskey, because it's, you know, whiskey it's a luxury good. It's high end. You know, the cheapest bottle we have in our store is £35, and it goes up to about £30,000, £40,000, and we got stuff that's £500,000 in the warehouse. You know, so it is a very luxury good product. What we have seen, and like I said earlier, is that consumers are becoming a bit more knowledgeable, or they're just wanting to be more knowledgeable. So people are actually looking at a bottle. You know, people aren't really going like, oh, I saw an advert about Macallan the other day, I want that one. You know, that's sort of gone almost now. On the bars as well, people, you know, you notice no one ever asks for a gin martini anymore. People want to know what gins you got to put into it. You know, people are really being very specific about the spirits. So I think the general spirits knowledge is really increasing within the whiskey world itself. Absolutely. You know, we had about 4 years ago, 2 years ago, the birth of the NAS, the non-age statement, which, you know, people never really used to bring out non-age statement whiskies, and it was all into blends. But you're seeing a lot of distilleries now that are bringing out the NAS, and it's their sort of drive of the younger, especially in my industry, the younger whiskey drinker. You know, it was all old white guys in smoking jackets in the 90s. That's what it was. And it was it was horrendous. But now more people are getting into whiskey. It's open to everybody. And it's great. You know, we're in the middle of Soho, and we've got a insanely diverse group of people in there. You know, we do women's and whiskey nights as well, like only women out in the bar. So, because now that's so popular as well. Like, they're full every time. And it's nice that we're seeing such a diverse crowd getting into whiskey. So from my world, younger drinkers are coming in, people are really knowledgeable, and with like the birth of like the independent bottlers, single cask, limited releases, people are going down that route. They want something special, they want something they haven't seen on TV, they want that sort of uniqueness and curated sort of experience, which is what we do in the shop. You know, we don't have price lists on the bar, and you know, we don't have menus. You know, we ask people, like, you know, what do you normally eat, what do you normally drink, and we sort of gauge their palate. And then we'll sort of, from that, we will present them with a few whiskies based around their price point. And that's how it is. So, but people are really engaging, like Anna said, people want to be engaged. You know, before we start asking, so what do you normally eat and drink when trying to buy whiskey? Like, no, I just want that one, I saw it on the advert. You know, nowadays people want to listen, and they really want to hear your knowledge, and they really want to understand it, which is great for us, because it's kind of like we're not talking to a brick wall, because we sit there and we love what we do. And we just want to basically just pass on our passion. And just, you know, we wax lyrical about alcohol all day long, but, you know, trying to get that sort of 30-second chat into people, you know, people want to listen and engage. I love it. It's great. Like, the customers that come in, I couldn't ask for better. And the younger customer, people are more engaged. On the sustainability front, people are changing. We're seeing it in, like, especially my industry. I'm not sure about the wine industry. In the whiskey world, packaging's changing because it's like high-end bottles. You'll see a lot in the wine world. I know Anne and Emily, those blow up like plastic things that are incredibly annoying and like really. So we are coming up. There's like cardboard hexagonals now. I have a subscription service called Drams to Door. It's completely recyclable, the whole thing, you know, from start to finish. So we are getting a lot more engaged. There are a few distilleries like Deanston, for example, is completely off the grid. So they actually make their own power, you know, so you do get it. But I think the biggest thing, they are changing the way that they've done packaging now to try and do it, because people don't remember, not all glass is recyclable. You know, so people are going down a different route. But
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Simon. Kind of, again, a lot to unpack in there for the general audience. What to kind of distill that down is the people who are drinking are changing, what they're drinking is changing, and how they're drinking is changing. So that's quite important for anyone who chooses to go into retail world to understand that. It's very crucial to understand the demographic. You know, in the past, it was this kind of, if you build it, they will come. You know, if you bottle it, you know, you could sell it. But now you need to know who's drinking your whiskey or beer or wine or spirit, where it's being sold, how it's being sold. That will enable you to be able to maximize your profits, making sure that you're putting the right wine, beer, or spirit in the right hands, rather than just having this shotgun approach of, you know, we'll just bottle it and throw it.
Exactly. Don't just get the big brands in. You know, we try thousands of, I've tried best part of 4,500 whiskies in the last couple of years, you know, because we've got to try it all. And you are right. It's all about finding the right whiskey for the right people. But like the wine world, there are millions out there. So try to decipher that and just sort through all the crap just to get the good stuff. But yeah, there is there's a taste element, heritage element. Obviously, there's a financial element to it, demographic, psychological element to it. It's all about that. And like I was saying earlier, there's just so many things before that bottle goes in that shelf. There's about 100 different things we've got to figure out before that bottle goes in that shelf.
Fab. Thank you, Emily. Hey, you were kind of nodding pretty much the entire time, agreeing with a lot that was being said. How does that apply to the wine world? How have you seen the wine world evolve? A two-part question. How have you seen the wine world evolve? And what does a good day look like, in what you do? So
in terms of evolution, I think it's definitely, as the others have said, a greater curiosity amongst customers. I've certainly found that people are willing to spend a bit more as well, which is great working in an independent wine merchant. People are interested in where their wine comes from. They want to know who's made it. They are interested in eco credentials as well from the wineries. So that's been really really lovely to see. I've worked in wine for 6 years, so it's not like I've got decades of experience to draw on, but that's been what I've seen in the last years. In terms of what a good day looks like, these days I spend less and less time actually working on the shop floor. I started at the Oxford Wine Company working full-time in what at the time was our only shop in Oxford. And now and then I do go back and I spend a day working in retail, and those are always my favorite days. I love them. I'll chat to customers. People are always really interested. It's lovely being able to share your interest and share your passion with people. Finding them the right bottle. I think it's like a fun kind of jigsaw puzzle, finding the right bottle for the right person. And then you do all sorts of kind of fun practical stuff like making displays, making signs. I ended up doing things I never thought I'd do, sort of learning how to do all this DIY because, we're a small company and we don't have contractors that come in and do things. So it's just really varied and really fun. So those are always my favorite days, really. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Emily. And having looked at what a good day looks like, what does a day from hell look like? What does a tough day for Anne look like? So another two-parter. What does a tough day look like? And what do you think are the skill sets that, again, being a career talk, what do you think are the skill sets or transferable skills that do help you overcome those challenges when they present their ugly heads?
Yeah, definitely. I think I was feeling a bit jealous of that DIY skills. I think in a big business we don't get that freedom. And I think part of that, I think a lot of people, look at that I want to be a buyer role. I think it's important to try and articulate what working for a retailer in that kind of head office space needs. I think I would also say there's no bad day, because if there's a bad day, then you're in the wrong place. We all adore what we do, but it does help that I love a challenge and I love a problem. Okay, give me a crisis and I'm off. But actually, I think the most challenging days for me are the ones where, frankly, you spend most of it with your head in a spreadsheet, looking at a P&L and trying to make the numbers work. That's probably half my life is making the numbers work, dealing with personnel, dealing with basic management. And I think management and commercial awareness and understanding how margin works, all of that stuff is it's the bread and butter of retail. At the end of the day, you've got to sell stuff, and you've got to hit certain numbers in order for that to be viable, and you can't do any of the fun stuff if the basics aren't right. So actually, if you're going to work in retail, then you've got to get your head around the numbers. You've got to get your head around the supply chain. You've got to get your head around all the different elements of that and how to work with the supply base, what that means. Some of the really boring stuff as well, like the legals of how you actually, what you are allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. A lot of that compliance is very important. So I guess a bad day for me is a day in which I just spend all of my time looking at compliance and spreadsheets and actually not necessarily getting to any of the fun stuff. But the joy of this job and the joy of most of our jobs in retail is that actually there can be a huge amount of variability and excitement if you can get your time management right. Time management's the key as well. But actually, and I think from COVID, it's been even harder, because I find myself going from, maybe a call where I'm talking to my team about some general admin about work and what needs to happen, and then I'm on numbers, and then I might suddenly be on a call to 2,000 customers talking about blending, and then I'm back to you know, another team management call, and actually you have to be able to flip between different skill sets quite with some agility.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anne. Yeah, I mean, a couple of things that I picked up there. I mean, again, being someone who imports wine, and I'm sure that the entire team of panelists will understand, will agree. Sorry, it's the numbers at your spine there. That it's non-negotiable. You know, you need to make sure that you hit the right profit margin on every single product. You need to, you know, if you're going to go into retail, you need to be able to be good cop and bad cop at the same time. You need to be able to have tough conversations with your suppliers, and you need to be able to have, you know, fun conversations with your suppliers at the same time. Things are not always going to go to plan, so you need to be able to solve problems. You know, you'll come in. We've had, for example, you know, it took us 4 months to move 2 pallets of wine from Cyprus, and you'll be sitting down and just sending emails back and forth to logistics companies. You go, you know, I'm supposed to be a wine buyer, I'm supposed to be a wine taster, or whatever it might be, and you spend your entire day, you know, talking about a pallet or a truck stuck in the middle of somewhere and what paperwork it needs to be able to move to the next step of the supply chain. Simo, if I may come back to you. So you obviously, you mentioned you do subscription, you do online, you've got the bars. What would you say are some of the unique challenges? Let's kind of look at the 2 ends of the business, say the bar and the online stuff and the subscriptions. What are some of the challenges that the subscription might face, or someone who's running, you know, a totally online business might face, versus someone who's actually got a bar, and vice versa? Since you've got both, you might be able to shed a bit of light.
Yeah, I mean, the tough challenges. I mean, at the end of the day, it's trying to get your product in front of people and getting them to drink it, regardless if it's bar, retail, or shop. You know, you need to get people in there to buy it. The hardest bit, and it's one that I face a lot, and you know, we outsource this, is especially with the online subscription. It becomes a marketing game. You know, it is completely down to the laws of Google and marketing, which stuff that learning about recently is very, very hard. You know, my life was always being sell to the customer and get in front of there. But with the bars as well, there's a huge PR element to it. You know, unfortunately, there are loads of good bars. I mean, my bars are great. We win awards and it's fantastic, but all the awards you win in the world, people still might not come. Luckily, we are very busy, but you know, having that PR game, it's just all about getting people in front of you. And that is very different knowledge. So people always, like, when they come up with great products, and there are so many great products in the world, in the alcohol world, they just create that product and they think the arrogance behind it is, yeah, it's great because I think it's great, so it will sell.
Everyone else will think it's great. Yeah.
There are 100 things better out there, or just as good out there as your product. So stop trying to think yours is the best. It's not, it will never will be, you know. So what we try, the hardest thing is getting people to your product, whether it be online and subscription for either marketing routes, in the bar, and doing, you know, through like PR or anything, or in marketing as well. But your product has to be amazing. It's always like the number one thing. You always have to have a solid, fantastic product, which is, you know, it's easy to do if you know what you're talking about and you do your knowledge, you do your research, but it's only half the journey, and that's a tough bit, you know. So we've just launched our subscription service, so we're going through all of like the marketing process at the moment and just like getting that out and starting it new for it. It's our first subscription based sort of like part of the business we've ever run, so that's a bit of a challenge as well, getting people to that. It's going well, but you know, it was an uphill climb. With the bars, it's PR. You know, I've launched many a sites in my life. You know, you need to get it right the first time, because you only get one chance when you launch it, and that's it. You know, I've launched bars that haven't done well, and luckily I've sort of found the formula for doing it right, especially with bars and stuff like that. So we found the right formula, and now they do very well. But you know, you can fuck it up pretty quickly. Yeah.
I would also just echo that point around one of the most difficult things about working in a buying team is the constant flow of people trying to sell you things that aren't relevant, aren't appropriate, aren't good enough, and the numbers don't work, and literally just endless people telling you they've got the best soil, the best product, and
best gin in the world.
Yeah, that is probably. Especially when I'm not even the direct buyer for stuff, and they'll still
that
just
specific thing.
Yeah. So if you're trying to sell something into retail, do your research. Just going to stop it there.
Yeah, please, exactly. Don't if you're the wine buyer, and you know, I'm in a whiskey shop, the amount of people during what we call gin season in my bar is, you know, that summertime when everyone's trying to sell you every gin under the sun, and they come in and goes, so we've got this brand new gin, it's this and this and this, and I'm like, and you cut it down, because we know, I know spirits and I know where it's come from. You're like, so it's owned your own made, so you didn't actually make, you got that made at Thames Distillery and whacked your own label on it. I could copy your recipe and do the same thing myself. And you kind of tell people that, and they're like, oh, I said, well, that's the bare truth. That's the reality. Stop thinking it's good. Come and me with a real, do your research and come and me with a good product. But yeah, like I said, I hate it. It's so annoying.
The other point I'll make on the end of that is that here is a different way to think about it, rather than kind of making the solution and approaching a company and saying, here's the solution. Ask the company what the problem is to start with. Approach Simo or approach a buyer and say, listen, where are the gaps in your shelf? What are you missing? What is it, a price point thing? Is it a quality thing? Is it a whatever that might be? And then go away and make that and fix that problem for them. I found from kind of my kind of limited experience that works best, rather than importing things and say I'll import it and I'll just attack the market and hope for the best.
No, you're right. You're very right.
You're fighting a losing battle at that point. You need to almost where's the gap? Where's the need? What are people drinking now? What are the supermarkets looking for? Is it a packaging thing? Is it a sustainability thing? Whatever it might be, go and then find that solution and bring it back into the market.
Don't tell companies to buy your products. It's an asking thing. Okay, guys, I've got this. Is there a gap? Or if you've got a product already, or what is the gap? Can I fill it? Don't go like yourself, Emily Ann. We all get annoyed with people just sending us stuff going, yeah, it's great. No. Sorry. It's not.
Emily, if I may come to you, and obviously you do, you kind of got loads of different things which you do. How closely do you work with, the other parts of the retail, the supply chain? So how closely do you work with the buyer? How closely do you work with, the shop managers, or, how does that work? How does that kind of, dynamics work?
Yes, so we are a relatively small team of about sort of 25 people across the whole company. So we all work quite closely together. I have a retail team of one retail manager, and then so 2 or 3 shop managers, and then a few retail assistants. So I work very closely with them, just making sure that everything's kind of going well, that they've got a point of contact at the head office, and that, just basically everything's running smoothly. Then in terms of supply and buying, I actually at first, when I thought I wanted to go into the wine trade, I thought I wanted to be a buyer.
Everyone thinks that for some reason.
And I realized what I actually like doing is tasting wine and dispensing opinions about it. And I don't want to do any of the rest of it. So we've got a buying team, and then we've got kind of unofficial buyers who are people like myself who come in and dispense their opinions. And we all work very closely together. We're all in offices next door to one another, and decisions are very much made kind of as a group about things. So it's, we're a family-run business as well. And so at a small company like this, everyone is involved in everything, I would say. And if people are interested in being involved in things as well, then they have a chance to. So we've had, a new recruit who's a real spirits enthusiast. And so we're like, right, you are our spirit specialist now, and so he's immediately, after only about 3 months of being employed, now helping our spirits buyer with some of that. So it's, people can get involved in anything at the Oxford Wine Company, which is quite fun. It's a good part of the job.
Fab, thank you so much. Again, just to kind of to buttress in that, every single panelist has made a point about being nimble and about being agile in one way or another. In terms of retailing, whether it be beer, wines, or spirits, you cannot, it's going to be, let me say you cannot, it's going to be challenging for you if you approach it from the point of view as, I'm a buyer and I only do buying, and I'm only interested in going out on fancy buying trips. And to be honest, a lot of people want to be buyers because their vision of being buyers, we travel the world and we pick up amazing wines, drink amazing wines, and place orders, and that's pretty much it. Not necessarily, for example, during my time at Waitrose, you have wines which are going on promotion. Buyers have very, very key targets to hit. You have to be having negotiations with your suppliers, which you might not necessarily want to have. It might come, you might have had a product that's doing really well over the course of 4, 5, 6, 7 years, but your list just needs a refresh. So you've got to then go and have a conversation with a supplier, which is, the product, there's nothing wrong with it. I just, I need something else. And so there are really there are tons of challenges you're going to face, and you can't approach it from a point of view of I only do retail, or I only do marketing, or I only do this. You've got to be shooting yourself in the ankle essentially. You need to be nimble. Coming back to Anne's point about a series of fortunate or unfortunate accidents, whatever whatever way you might want to look at it. It's just about being open to saying yes. An opportunity presents itself, and you say, yeah, I'll have a go, and another opportunity presents itself, and you say, I'll have a go. From a jobs point of view, we've had people, who have applied for jobs and have had, they've got, now there are some transferable wine skills, or some transferable skills into the wine world, but if you've not worked in wine at all, it's very hard for you to, it's a different world altogether. I'm sure Sim will echo the same thing with spirits. It's a different world altogether. Yes, there's some skills you can transfer, but you need to be able to speak the lingo, and you need to be able to understand what we're talking about when we, what works. So, if you're trying to transition into the wine industry, you might want to be conscious, or the beers or the spirits industry, you might want to be conscious of the fact that it might take a step back to be able to take, a couple of steps forward. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Anne.
Yeah, I would agree, absolutely. And equally, I'd say that the product knowledge is the baseline. You can't do your diploma and then think you can walk into a buying role, because if you haven't got the buying skills or some experience in that area, then I'm afraid the WSET is not enough. However, you do need that base product knowledge and that product passion in order to be able to, even if you look at the MW network, as Emily, you'll know if you're studying it as well, being an MW does not make somebody a good buyer or a good journalist or a good writer or a good blender or a good winemaker or any of those things. But what it does do is give you the most incredible sort of understanding of what questions to ask across all of those fields, to be able to have a deeper understanding, which then contributes to your prime role or your prime skill set. So I think the product knowledge is the thing that probably got you into it. But it's not the thing that will keep you there.
Yeah. Interest. That was one of the questions that we're going to make. In terms of Simo, if we may come down to product knowledge, if I may bring that down your way, because obviously you're working with gins, you're working with whiskies, different types. How important would you say that is? Is it the be all and end all, or is it part of a grander scheme of thing? In terms of, someone approaches you and say, I'm looking for a job at one of your bars, or I'm looking to get into how important is product knowledge? Is it? No, what are your thoughts?
It's incredible. I mean, it's very important. I mean, for example, my bar in Soho has 300 different whiskies on the bar, and they change constantly. So you get about 500 go through every month. We don't have a menu. The staff have to know every single whiskey off by heart, taste profile, and like within price region as well. They have to know everything. So there's no menu, no book you can look at it. So our trainings are intense and long, and we do it all by tasting and trying everything. It's one of the things when, it's what I tell a lot of people when they do come into the alcohol world, that, you can read the books and you can do that, and it's great. And, like I said, but you can do, the WSETs are great, but they only give you, they'll give you a strong backbone. But wherever sort of like industry you want to go to, and I would recommend always sort of fine-tuning your industry. Spirits as a whole is tough. Go into gin, go into vodka, go into whiskey, go into wine, and then just really nail down your knowledge. And it's long, and I'm constantly still learning. I've got books about the chemical, the chemical engineering side of distillation that I'm currently reading at the moment, teaching me all the esters and everything that are coming out in fermentation with whiskies. So we're constantly learning, but we're also constantly drinking. I'm constantly trying stuff, constantly figuring out the differences between whiskey. Every day we'll do about 20 or 30 new whiskies, the samples that come in. So product knowledge is key. Personality is always key as well. It's the one thing you can't teach. When we come to hire people, product knowledge has to be very good. But our training programs, like to start working for me on the bars, for example, we'll get about 100 something CVs pre-pandemic. From that, we'll get CVs. We'll come in, we'll give you a test that's an impossibly hard test where the pass rate's only 50%. There'll be stupidly hard questions on there, but it's sort of like a personality thing as well. Then we'll do a personality test. Then I'll stick you on the bar. I'll pick 5 whiskies at random. You have to do an hour tasting for me on those whiskies. So it's hard and you have to know the product knowledge, but we can also teach it to you as well. The passion is the one thing you can't teach. And it's the one thing that, no matter how much you want to do something, you need to have the passion to do it. You can't go into booze industry thinking I'm just here for the money. I'm just here for like the fame or whatever. No, you have to be passionate about it, because you will stick out like a sore thumb, especially in retail, especially customer facing. And, you know, people like, if you're talking to people like Anne, the buying team, they're going to know a mile off if you're not passionate about what you're doing.
You can smell it off.
Passion and knowledge product is, you need both of them. You just won't survive otherwise, unfortunately.
You need enough knowledge you don't make a mistake, because mistakes are confidence killing.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, you can't teach a personality, unfortunately. It just
and resilience.
Yeah. Oh yes. You know, you're gonna have, when you start getting into this. I mean, you know, my life starts at 9 a.m. because with all like the e-com and the retail side, but it also finishes at midnight sometimes. You know, if I'm on the bars or if I've got clients in. So, you know, my days are long and they are fun. And you know, like Emily said earlier, and it's actually the funnest part is actually being on the bar or in the shop floor selling to people. It's really good.
Chatting with customers.
But yeah, you've got to have that resilience. You've got to, and you just got to understand that once you've done these WSETs, that's part one. You know, even if you get to level 3, that's only the beginning of it. You know, level 3 for a very like sort of like luxury retail like mine, or higher, or specialists, or if you want to go into specialists like the Oxford Wine Company or even a Waitrose, that's like the base. Like that's the base knowledge you need to have, and you need to get on from there as well.
Fab. Thank you so much, Simo. The interesting point I got from both Anne and Simo chatting is that, you know, the passion is what it's going to get you through those 14, 15-hour days. If you don't have the passion for it, the passion is what's going to get you, you know, in the middle of the night going through Excel spreadsheets when you don't want to do it. You know, when you've got 5 tastings lined up and you've got a sore ankle, what's going to get you through those days is having that passion for it, is being, you know, doing something that you love, you know, which, you know, there've been times where I've run a tasting and it feels like 10 minutes and you check your watch and it's been 4 hours. You know, what kind of makes it fun, in quotes, is that you're doing something that you love, you're doing something that, you know, you care deeply for, and that, you know, that kind of, you know, it gets you through the tougher days. Because I kind of imagine sometimes, you know, what if I was selling something else? What if I were retailing a different product? You know, I don't know, you know, plastic bottles, for those exist. Or what if I were retailing, you know, cloths? You know, I wouldn't have that same enthusiasm for getting up and going, you know, because you are going to suffer some knockdowns. For example, Simo mentioned, you know, 100 CVs coming in. Of those 100 CVs, he might hire 1 or 2. So that means 98 people have been, you know, turned away. So you're going to face a lot of backlash. So what is going to give you that kind of enthusiasm to get up and go again when, you know, it seems like the whole world's against you, is having that kind of baseline passion for it. Emily, if I may come to you, again, kind of similar question in terms of, or not a similar question, different question altogether. Are there ways into the retail or the drinks industry, let's say the wine industry, for someone who's got no experience whatsoever? You know, say someone's, you know, a college kid who's just finished year up and, I don't know, sixth form or whatever, you know, 17, 18, 19, whatever it might be. They've got no real kind of experience in the wine industry or in the drinks industry. Are there any pathways? What do you think? What advice would you give to anyone who's in that kind of position?
So the advice I'd give to people is to start learning, do what you can to show your interest. So, you know, if you're a student, have you got a wine society that you can join? You know, is there a wine club around? Start reading, you know, start tasting, start drinking. And actually, you can write a very engaging cover letter, even if your CV isn't as full. Another piece of advice is actually, you know, just start working in hospitality. You know, I find that it's, you know, get a job as a, you know, as a bar back or as a food runner or something, you know, and you can find your way. That's what I did, you know, and you can find your way into wine through that. Also, when I'm looking for staff, you know, okay, it's become very competitive, but I have hired people with no experience before because they've been so interested and they've been so keen, and maybe, you know, they've researched wine and they learned about it, and you can tell that they're going to keep doing that. So I think the important thing is to just fuel your passion, find ways to express that to potential employers, and also send speculative cover letters as well. Even if someone's not advertising, you know, find out who the person who's responsible for hiring in retail is, and send them an email and just say, oh, I'm really interested in looking for a job in wine. What advice can you give me? Have you got any openings? Can I come and see you? And people are very receptive, I think. So that's my advice.
Fab. Thank you so much, Emily. I think, you know, the last point I'll add on that is there is no replacement for hard graft in our industry. There's no two ways about it. A lot of us, a lot of people who you see, for example, you look at Anne started from the shop floor. So did I. My very first job in the wine industry was literally, what you call a runner. I was filling shelves, and just by surrounding yourself with that product, and of course the pay isn't amazing, but it isn't bad either. But again, you're doing something which you're passionate about, and you're surrounding yourself with, it might be, again, in Simo's case, it might be whiskeys, it might be wines if you're on a shop floor. And there's a lot of information you get in by osmosis. I tell you, just by being in that environment where you've got the bottles around you, you're popping the bottles on the shelf, because you're not just going to be popping it on the shelf blindly. You're going to be reading the labels. You're going to be looking at, you're going to be picking up some things which no one's teaching you, but you're learning. For example, you'll see what sells often, what customers kind of migrate to, what people buy without being pushed. You'll see the wines that need a little bit of help to move off the shelf. And that will help you further down your career when you're creating a label, when you're creating a wine brand. You have an idea of what sells, what's important to customers. There've been, today, I propose wines to Waitrose, for example. I propose wines to Majestic and other retailers. And that what actually gets me out of jail, in quotes, is being able to draw back on that experience which I had in the shop floor and saying, this works, this will work because actually I've worked 10 years for you. I've worked, in the retail environment where I know that something that looks like this, smells like this, tastes like this, at this price point would absolutely work. So, as Emily mentioned, reach out to people, send emails, send CVs. We've got LinkedIn is a fantastic resource. Don't overdo it. If you've sent someone one email, two emails, and they haven't responded, it's probably time to move on. Don't hang on. That's just my thought process anyway. Anne, what do you think?
I do think what I do see a lot of is as Simo was saying, kind of linked to what you're saying, Max, is actually how the bits of personality you can't teach, because actually there are people who could spend 10 years working in retail and learn nothing, but actually you need to be inquisitive, you need to be asking questions, you need to be trying to understand, as you say, what customers, or why has the buyer listed that. You might think, well, I wouldn't have put that on the shelf. So can you find a way to have a quick conversation and say, just out of interest, why did you do that? Or what is behind that decision making? And you need to, as Simo said, you will never stop learning in this industry, because as soon as you think you have, there's another vintage anyway. So literally there is no way you can ever stop learning. But so I think keeping your eyes and ears open for opportunities, shadowing people, and really trying to understand what those roles require and why the decisions are made the way that they are, I think is probably the fast way to doing it. And I've seen one of the questions in the chat about people talking about lack of experience. I would say that actually there's no such thing as a lack of experience. There's lack of relevant experience. You've got experience. So the question is, what can you make transferable? What is it that your current experience can teach you about what you need to learn to where you want to get to, but also try to understand where those gaps are and then fill them specifically, as opposed to just thinking that the whole thing is too big to handle.
Yeah, like I'll touch on what Anne said as well. Like, lack of experience is obviously, we've given jobs to people that have little to no experience but loads of passion, and they want to learn. So cool, like Emily was saying earlier, you can start as a bar back, watch the cocktail bartenders if you want to learn. That's how every bar you started. You start at the bottom. So a lot of people, when they move from, say, if they come from another industry where they've worked their way up to a managerial position in that industry, you're going to start at the bottom here, but it's your passion that's going to get you through it. Passion we will see passion in your eyes, because we see it all the time with our own staff. And likewise, I've had people that have had 10 years of retail experience, 10 years of whiskey experience. And I had a guy that had 15 years of retail whiskey experience. I didn't hire him because he was just so dull. I'm like, you want to come work with me in Soho, one of the most cosmopolitan, beautiful places in the world? Yeah. And you've got an attitude like that. Like, it's just not going to work, So like Anne said, little experience, a lot of passion will get you in the door. But just understand that you're there and you've got to work your way up. But your passion will get you through there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Simo. I want to come back to something Emily said about reaching out and contacting buyers. I'll give kind of a real life experience from my time in Waitrose. At this point, I'd been Waitrose is a premium or an upmarket supermarket in the UK for our kind of global audience. And I was literally working on the shop floor filling shelves. And I noticed that, you know, the location of our waitress was quite an affluent or wealthy part of the country. And we tended to, we had only the kind of entry-level champagne. And so I drafted an email to the buyer and I said, you know, listen, this is, you know, this is where we are. This is what we are doing. You know, this is, you know, for example, you know, I went into the system and I downloaded, you know, all the champagnes that we sold in the last kind of year and a half. And I made a strong case for saying, you know, you really should retail, you really should have, you know, higher end, you know, champagnes in this shop. And, you know, 6 months down the line, a lot of back and forth, you know, our champagne category completely got changed based off the back of that email. So, those are the sort of things that will kind of set you apart, because it would have been easy for me to just go, yeah, it's my job is literally filling the shelves, right? And just do that and move on. But, you know, by being engaged, by, you know, showing that extra commitment, that I wouldn't even say commitment, grabbing the bull by horns, whatever you want to call it.
I think I remember it as well. It was also about having done the research and pulled the numbers, and rather than just saying, I think you should do this.
Yeah.
And the buyer would be like, well, okay, great.
Yeah,
that goes into the other like 7 million emails that I've got.
I always get.
Yeah, but if you it's thinking through your audience. Who are you speaking to? And you talk in one way to a customer or another way to a buyer. Actually, what information does that buyer need from you in order to get
make
the
that decision
that you want?
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to what I mentioned about being able to be good cop and bad cop at the same time. You know, because again, coming back to, you know, a bar situation, or if you're in Emily's case, a wine shop situation, you know, you might have someone who walks into the wine shop who wants 20 minutes of your time. And as someone who's in retail, you need to be able to give them 20 minutes of your time. Even if you've got cages at the back that need stacking, the customer takes precedent. You know, you need to sit there, you know, give them all the time they want. On the flip side of the spectrum, you might have someone who comes in and they know exactly what they want, when they want it, how they want it. But you might have just come back from that amazing trip in Italy, and you want to spend half an hour talking to everybody in your path about your Italian trip. That's not the time to have that conversation. So it's about being as agile as possible, knowing when to switch into this mode, you know, when to be Batman and when to be Robin, and that's gonna, you know, that's really gonna get you through the tougher days. Emily, in terms of, I want to come back to, you know, a lot of points have been made about how do we get experience and how do we get, you know, how do we move on in the wine world. I'm trying to switch from one industry into the wine industry. What are some of the, I'm going to come to Emily first and then to Anne. What are some of the transferable skills which you say in your role right now? What are some of the skills which there might be people who are not in the wine industry, but those skills definitely kind of cross over?
Yeah, so I think certainly picking up on what you just said about knowing how to speak to different people and knowing how to read people, because, you know, some customers will want to have an in-depth chat about yeast with you, and some customers, you know, have never heard of yeast and don't know how wine is made. They just know it's a thing. So knowing how to speak to people and not scare anyone off and make people feel good is a thing that is a part of so many different jobs. You know, any job that you're dealing with people, that's going to be a skill that you have. I think in my own job, in terms of sort of marketing and retail, you know, it's about thinking creatively. It's about kind of seeing the selling points of different things, you know, and that's also a part of many jobs. Thinking analytically, being able to be agile, which we've already mentioned before, you know, in terms of your thinking. You know, there are so many different skills that are important in wine, and certainly as well being able to assimilate a huge amount of information and then distill it into a really easily understandable you know, either phrase or piece of writing, or, you know, or even infographic, you know, something like that. And actually the other thing is that the wine world, you know, as technologically advancing as we are, we're still a bit behind. So any kind of technological skills as well that you have, I think, would be hugely appreciated by many companies. So I think, you know, there are a lot of skills that are transferable into wine.
Thank you so much, Emily. And if we may kind of segue onto you, you know, what are some of the things which people who are not in the wine industry, how might they kind of tweak their CVs? What are some of the things, you know, advices you could give to saying, you know, how do you break that mold of I'm trying to get in but I can't? What are your thoughts?
my thoughts are that we all like to think of the wine and spirits industries as being totally separate and totally unique, and they do have their unique aspects, but they're not really. If you're trying to get into a part of the wine and spirits industry that has anything in common with other industries, then pull out those bits. So is it people management? Have you led a big team? Do you can you lead? Can you inspire your team to come with you and follow you? Obviously the commercials I spoke about before. Emily's absolutely right. Marketing, do you have marketing qualifications? Do you have technological qualifications? I mean, you'd be surprised how many people in the wine industry can't even use a VLOOKUP on Excel. Do you, all of those skill sets that you may or may not have used in another industry, or you may have learned through studying something completely different. All of those are of value to the wine and spirits industry.
Fab, thank you. I think it's about again, it comes down to finding where the gap is and adapting your solution to what that gap might be. So rather than approaching thinking I want to work in a bar and that's all I want to do, and it's about thinking, okay, what does this specific bar need for? Okay, if we may come back to Simo, if you're going to work in the subscription part of the company, it's vastly different it's a completely different skill set from if you're going to work behind the bar. And so it's about how the applicant kind of adapts their CV, and someone who might say, I don't have any bar experience, or I don't have any spirits experience, but this is what I've done in my previous job, which I think will fit, or which I think will solve some of your problems. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, actually, a good example. One of the guys that works with my Soho bar, a guy called Jason, he had a zero spirits experience. He never, I think he worked in a pub once, but he come from he was actually a gardener, professional landscaper. But he was in my bar pretty much 3 nights a week just because he loved the bar. And we saw him in there, and we saw he loved it, and he started going through there. And we actually, luckily, we saw him go through, and every sort of whiskey he's trying, he had his notebook, like we all have, the tasting book, you go through, right down, tasting notes, everything. And we saw him do that, and he did that for ages and ages. And then we asked him to cover one night, and he's now full-time on my bar, on my whiskey bar, 300 whiskies. So, on his CV, we saw those skills. And, if you don't have a lot of skills, there are transferable skills, like Anne and Emily was saying. I've had people that come from financial backgrounds, or I've had people that come from sort of like building background, but they're good with people and they have work ethic, and they want to get up in the morning and they want to slog, and they're great with people. Just kind of showing, even if you don't have the product knowledge that we were talking about earlier, showing that you have some sort of people skills or some sort of like leadership skills, or some sort of I show any sort of passion, that will work. It's a transferable skill, because as much as we know all the product knowledge, all we do is sell stuff to people.
I would also say there are roles for people without that kind of communication style as well. So if you're sitting here thinking, oh God, I'm not that kind of person that interacts with others like that, there are roles for accountants, HR professionals, IT, system support, logistics, all that stuff is required in, Max, especially at the moment, God, if you're good at logistics, get yourself into the industry, we're desperate for you. Paperwork, legals, lawyers, all of that stuff is just as important for the wine and spirits industry as it is for selling anything else.
Yeah, and you can come into the route that way as well. Like I'm saying, you can, if you are a lawyer and you want to come into the booze industry, you can go through that way. Or if you've got accounting experience, go through that way, or that way, or that way. There are many ways into it, into the industry. Just about finding the transferable skill.
Yeah, I would say play to your skill set. Don't try and make a massive step. Say I was listen. There are things which you're good at, and your job is generally going to be easier if you're playing to your skill set. If you're into, for example, moving stock around, the wine industry cannot get enough people, or the spirits industry cannot get enough people who are good at moving stock around. What we mean by being able to talk to haulier companies, talk to delivery companies, solve problems with, this cage is broken, that case got delivered to that customer, this one was delivered twice and that one didn't have delivery. That's that kind of people, problem solving skills. It's really, really short in the wine industry. And it's one of those things where you don't need product knowledge to get across. If you are thinking, I need to go, know with the greatest of respect, wines, beers, and spirits course is going to teach you how to talk to people. It's going to teach you how to solve problems. So that's one of those skill set which, the last one which I'll make before I move on, is if you're good at digital marketing, if you're good at selling stuff online, if you know all the buzzwords of, how do I get my page to rank high on Google? Those are the, we live in a pandemic world right now where, everyone's sitting at home, and the main way of buying, of retailing, it's now all online. We've seen a huge shift towards e-commerce and purchasing goods online. So if you're good at, making a website look smart, making a website slicker, those are skills which you can, it's an easy way in at the moment. So we mustn't necessarily think that you must go through and, do 4 years of WSET or 4 years or become a master of wine. Yes, those help, as we've all mentioned, but they're not the be all and end all. Emily, if I may come to you, being, having gone through university, gone through the formal education route, if you could go back and kind of advise, a younger version of yourself, and say, what are some of the courses which you advise our audience to focus on? And what are some of the things which you would think this is absolutely crucial being able to work in the wine industry?
So really my main piece of advice would be to do what interests you, because those are the things that you're going to do best at and enjoy most. Certainly the things that helped me most were the WSET courses, absolutely. But I think the reason why they helped me so much is because I was so keen, and because, because I really wanted to learn. So I think, there's no point in forcing yourself through a course when if you're not feeling it. So I think the most important thing is to do what you enjoy. Because I've certainly, I studied English literature, I've studied law, and I've studied wine, and every single one of those things has contributed to where I am now. And so I think it's just important to do what interests you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Sorry. Anne, if we may come to you, kind of just last point before I move on from this. For anyone, so we've mentioned the point of transferable skills. What are career progressions like in the industry? What are your thoughts on? Do you feel like the wine industry is a place where people can move along, or?
I think yes, but probably not as much as we'd like to think. I don't think a lot of those paths are very clear.
Mm-hmm.
And equally, I think there is something to be said for the fact that it's a numbers game and it is competitive. There are a huge amount of people working at kind of entry-level hospitality, and there are very few buyers, and that's just the sad reality. Yeah. So if you want to, and it also depends on what you see as climbing the pole. Do you want to be a maitre d'? Do you want to be a sommelier? Do you want to be a buyer? Do you want to own your own wine shop? Do you want to run a wine bar? All of those things are different routes, but equally you're always going to start from lots of people to fewer people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think tenacity is important, as I just said in an answer to Renata. Tenacity, but also being realistic and being really open-minded about what your strengths are, what they're suited to, and how you can build on those and then sell those in order to get yourself to the right point. And also being realistic. I honestly, I started the MW because I was sitting in a role at work, and I thought, I'm not going to get anywhere near where I want to be for another 5 to 8 years. And this is going to frustrate me if I haven't got something really else to get my teeth into to keep me engaged and keep me inspired. Little did I know the MW would take longer than that and be far more painful than anything else I'd ever tried. And also, I hasten to add, more inspirational, more inspiring, and more beneficial. It's an amazing journey. But these things don't happen overnight.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of dabbled in the MW, and I will be at some point again next year or the coming year. It's one of those things which you have an idea of what you want to achieve. It's the same in every part of our industry. You might think, I want to be a buyer in 5 years. Great, that's your idea of what you want to achieve. But the reality is that it might take longer. It's more often than not going to take longer, or it might take shorter, and you need to be open to the various twists and turns of what the industry throws at you. For example, sorry.
No, I was just going to refer back to what you said earlier about going sideways. Because as you say, being open-minded is really important. And also sometimes just sticking something out that where you can see that the potential's there, but the path might not be outlined in spotlights for you.
Yeah, Simo, if we may come to you in terms of career progression in the spirits industry, you've hired a bunch of gals and guys. Have you seen people kind of work their way up the industry? What would you say to anyone who's kind of getting into spirits because they want to kind of work their way up? What are the career prospects out there? What do you thought?
I mean, and said this, there are so many different paths you can take. You can go down, you can start the hospitality route. A lot of people in the spirits game, especially the sales and people like that, they tend to start in hospitality. So a lot of the brand ambassadors you see today are mostly ex-bartenders. So they've started that way, and those bartenders would have started barbacks, or just cleaning the bar or KPs. So they've worked their way up through hospitality, and it's a sort of, if you go for hospitality, you can go way up, and you can either get to a certain point where you're sort of like the manager of the bar or head bartender, and then you can go, right, I'm going from a night walker to a day walker, as we call them. Just the salespeople go into companies and they move into a sales role. And from the sales role, you can work where there's a whole another different paths where you can go from salesperson to importer, buyer, all sorts, to running your own company, to distribution, to actually getting brands in and marketing them. Or if you go down the hospitality route, you can work your way up through spirits, and then you can go on to more of a refined job, work for me, be a whiskey specialist, or go down the tastings route, or go down to owning your own bar one day. There are so many ways and sort of which way you can do. It kind of depends what your end goal is, really. Yeah. Although the one thing I realized, I was supposed to do chemical engineering uni, and that was going to be my life at sort of 18 years old, and I decided that's not for me, and then just went on and started my own company at the age of sort of 19. It was a construction company, and I thought I was going to do that for the rest of my life. Sort of 10 years and years later, to legal bars, to my own restaurant, did it all off my own back, and just slogged out so much in my 20s, just slogging out and working, and then I ended up getting into the whiskey. It's having that end goal in mind is great, but I guarantee it'll change. You'll find something that you love. None of us started out life when we got to 18 going, I want to own a whiskey bar. It doesn't start, but sort of figure out broadly what you want to do. There are routes, mostly they pertain to some kind of going up through retail, going up through hospitality. They're sort of the easier ways to get into sort of the industry, because at the very bottom you can get into the job role with limited or no qualifications, and you can start there, but I'm not going to require qualifications to hire a barback. But you can work your way up through there, and you start taking WSETs. All my staff have WSETs, but they started out as barbacks in some bar form or another. So kind of define where you want to go. But if you have little to no qualifications, start through the retail, start through the hospitality route, because you can start there and work your way up.
Thank you so much, Simo. The other point I'm going to make, it's probably only kind of useful for the UK, but I'm sure you'll find something similar in whichever country you're in. We've been seeing, due to a combination of both Brexit and COVID, that there's been a huge shortage in hospitality. They can't get enough staff in there. And I'm sure in every country, every region has got a version of that going on. There might be socioeconomic factors which create a huge gap in the market. Now, it might not be ideal for you. You might be saying, I want to work in wine. I don't really want to go down the hospitality route. I would say start, because again, as Simo said, what the four of us, whatever it is we're doing today, it's highly unlikely was what we thought we were going to be doing at 18, 19 years of age. But the difference is that we kind of put one foot forward and just say, I'll give that a go and see how that kind of evolves. And so that's what I advise, find out where the gap is in the market. It might not necessarily be ideal for you now, but give it a go and see how you get on. If I had to turn down the opportunities to do WSET with Waitrose, 15 years ago, I wouldn't be here today. It was just being open to saying, yeah, okay, I'll give that a go. And, here we are.
It is touching what Anne said earlier, once you've got your first step in the sort of the industry, the booze industry, it's much easier to move sideways then. Yeah. It'll be very hard to move up over time, but if you've got your first step in, you can laterally move sideways. You can go into retail, think that's not for me, I'm going to go to hospitality. Or you can go in hospitality, go, that's not for me. But it's so much easier to move once you're actually in the door.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you so much, Simo. Sorry, Emily, looking at the year ahead, we've had let's talk about the last 18 months. The less said about that, the better. But kind of looking at the next 12 months or so ahead, we are hoping that, especially in the UK, lockdown will be lifted in the next couple of weeks. What are some of the things you're most excited about? Trends, new things coming into the market, or just being able to go out again? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely getting into a real vineyard and not a fake Zoom background vineyard is quite high on the agenda.
It's up there.
Yeah, that's pretty high up there. I think really continuations of a lot of the trends that we've seen so far that have been accelerated by lockdown. So people being more curious about wine, people being willing to kind of explore new things. All of that is really, really exciting. And I think I'd really love to see, more of that. I'm really hoping that Brexit doesn't put the brakes on, the kind of diversity of wines that we've been able to find in the UK. That's been, it's been growing so much, and we're so spoilt for choice here. So that's another thing that, that I would love to see more of. So many reasons to be optimistic at the moment, and a lot of things to look forward to, I think.
Thank you so much, Emily. Anne, with your kind of events hat on, I'm sure you're really looking forward to being able to actually seeing people face to face and talking to people and hopefully shaking hands at some point. But beyond that, what were you kind of really enthusiastic about the next 12 months in terms of your role and the wine industry, the wider wine industry?
Oh, I think there's a lot to be excited about. It's huge amounts. I think re-engaging with customers, as you say, obviously getting back to real life events, but actually for customers to be able to open their own perceptions a little bit more again and to get out of their own houses and get away from much as wonderful as Zoom is, and we all love it very much. And it has, frankly, kept us all going for the year or so. I think just actually seeing customers getting re-engaged, and we have an opportunity for a bit of a restart and reset actually in quite a lot of areas, which I think is great. And then I also sit on a few sustainability panels, so I think sustainability for me is really interesting, again with this slight reset from customers, where people's thinking has changed, how that moves forward. And then how we implement that in what is a very new world in retail, both in terms of the balance between online and offline, but also how the market has slightly reset and rebalanced. And also the other thing I think it's interesting from the other guys on the panel where you've chosen, but actually the hybridization, which is such a word at the moment. I'm sorry, I've tried to avoid new normals, hybrids, all that stuff, but not grape hybrids, obviously. Hybrids between the on-trade and the off-trade. I think that's a really exciting opportunity for us to understand how a shopping experience is actually a genuine experience. So yeah, that's very shortly in summary what I'm excited about.
Amazing, thank you so much, Anne. Simo, Anne and Emily have just kind of chatted about what they're excited. I'm going to come to you for doom and gloom, unfortunately. What are some of the challenges you kind of envisage, or where should we kind of be careful, going into the next kind of 12 months, from a spirits point of view? What are some of the things you're looking at and going, that might be a little bit hairy? What are your thoughts?
Obviously, I'm lucky I work in whiskey, so it's all up in Scotland, so it's great. We're going to be wary of. There's going to be a lot of shit that comes into the country, like a lot of really bad products that come into the country, depending on what happens, and deals and bits and pieces like that. Unfortunately, that's what we're getting quite worried about in sort of, especially in the whiskey world, is sort of, the SWA have this huge power, but it's, of course, with the deals that are being done and not being attached to Europe, it's going to get very hard for them, and they're getting quite annoyed at the moment. And us as an industry as a whole is trying to sniff out all the rubbish that's about to come in. There's going to be a bit of a flooding in the market, especially in whiskey, unfortunately, in the next sort of 5-6 years, of just stuff that is allowed to be called whiskey when technically it isn't, by the SWA standards. So that's the thing I'm really worried about, in honesty. Staffing shortages is obviously a huge one, especially when I've got retail and hospitality businesses. That's very hard for us because a lot of our staff are European, and especially a lot of people that start out were so young, and settlement status, they're not being here long enough. But a lot of people start out in the hospitality industry at 19, 18. And, it was such a shame to see a mass exodus of people. Unfortunately, it was terrible. I'm not exactly a Brexit fan, being a Londoner and living this cosmopolitan life, but that's going to be a bit of a challenge as well, is to see, it's kind of try and predict. And we all sat down here, we all sort of have slightly different job roles in different sort of areas of the market, but seeing what, I'm really looking forward to seeing what 2022 full year is, and and how that's adapted to my 2019 P&L, and just seeing where the shifts are. And it's kind of trying to predict that shift. We're all going to do well, we'll all end up fine, but we work in booze in the UK. It's going to be fine.
People are always going to drink. Yes,
it's going to be fine. But it's just seeing how it moves, and that's the scary part, and where you've got to shift it, because you can put one foot in the wrong direction and it could all screw up.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's always been kind of fascinating about the wine industry, or the drinks industry in general. You could see companies start from nothing and skyrocket. At the same time, there's some companies which were once upon a time kind of stalwarts of the industry, and they no longer exist. So it is one of those things where, as much as we have to be enthusiastic and always glass half full about the future, but we must always be aware that we live and work in a very volatile industry where things can go wrong at a snap of a hat, and suddenly that company no longer exists. So that, from my personal point of view, it would be, just, enthusiastic, really looking forward to, like Simo 2022, seeing what a full, non-COVID year looks like. I'm borrowing Anne's word, if those hybrids, are here to stay, or if they were one-off, because I think that's really, really interesting. In the past, it's been, I'm on trade and I'm off trade, and they've been a clear divide between both. But we're seeing a real kind of, amalgamation of both. And are they here to stay? So there's just so many things to be enthusiastic for, but it's just be enthusiastic with a healthy, dose of caution, because it as we all know, it can go wrong at the flick of a coin. Last question for everyone on the panel. If I start with you, Emily, besides the MW, because I know you're going to smash it at some point, what are your personal, you took a real deep breath there when I mentioned that. Apart from kind of the MW, what are your personal goals in terms of personal development? Where do you want to kind of see yourself? How do you see yourself growing and evolving in the next couple of years?
God, so I only ever answer this kind of question in job interviews, or
I was going to say.
And I will be honest, it's very hard to see beyond the exam I'm facing in a few weeks. But generally, my goal is always to keep enjoying what I'm doing. That's the most important thing. So stay interested, stay in a role that keeps me stimulated, keep working with lovely people, and continue discovering things. So I've never ever had a specific goal that I've been looking at. I've always just done what's interesting and what's felt like the right thing at the time. So I'm going to slightly cop out of that question and say that that's what I want to do,
Thank you so much. Anne, what do the next couple of years look like? Where do you, how do you see yourself developing? How do you see your...
It's a great question, and like Emily, I think keeping enjoying it is the most important thing, but also keeping contributing and keeping creating and inspiring change. So I think for me, it's quite interesting, because we have just had a couple of restructures in our business. So actually, the next couple of years are really interesting, because I've got some new toys to play with, in terms of I've also got John Lewis. So now I've got some really interesting elements that I might be able to kind of engage with, but obviously there's a lot of new teams to learn, there's a lot of new people in new roles. So actually for me, exactly, for me there's a huge amount of learning again, which is great, but and also bringing more people with me on this kind of exciting drinks experience journey, and getting people inspired, and actually understanding how we talk to the right customers at the right place, in the right time, in the right way. So it's all customer led, but which means that actually there's so much more to learn, and as you say, understanding what those customers want in what is happening now, as opposed to that, which might be totally different from, or have evolved at least from where it was prior to COVID. So yeah, keeping learning, keeping my eyes open, ears to the ground, and just keeping reacting and driving forward, really, and that's what keeps it interesting.
Fab, thank you. Simo, last but not least, sir, having obviously purchased, a multi-award-winning bar, where do you take? Where's the next step? Once you get to the top of Everest, how do you move to the next direction, or what is the next direction?
I've always had this sort of view in life that I never have life goals. I have delusions of grandeur, and then just and then just try and hit it.
Yeah.
If my dad always told me, if I'm not stressed, I'm bored. But you have those illusions of grandeur, and I always aim for that. You know, I've got Singapore, New York, I want to do, and all sorts. It's great, and it's going to be great, and we'll probably end up getting there. But to be honest, the things I look forward to the most is obviously my family. Emily on here, hospitality retail in booze is a complete family orientated business. Everyone works together. We sell one of the most social products on the planet. You know, so we're all very tightly knit people. We work very long hours. But one thing, so looking forward to sort of expanding my family and sort of like, you know, sort of like bringing them all on their journey and sort of like developing their own skills, bringing them up in the world as well, because we only hire at the bottom and we build up. And then also, I don't know, so I like simple things like having the handshake from the guy that leaves the bar at 11 o'clock at night and go, that was the best experience I had in my life, mate. Cheers. You know, stuff like that. I love stuff like that. That's why I got into it, to be honest. It's just kind of, you know, if I can change someone's lives for a few hours and they really love it, then I've done my job and I'm really happy. You know. Yeah.
Fab. Thank you so much. Well, I'm just checking the questions. Most of the questions were answered that came through the Q&A, and we're about 4 or 5 minutes left. So I'm going to pull Julia back in. Julia, are you around?
I am indeed.
Yes. Would you like to put a bow on it and send us on our merry way?
Absolutely. I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone for contributing to the panel this evening. It's been really interesting to hear your stories, hear your thoughts. There's been some really useful information I think that everyone can take away from this tonight. So really appreciate that. Thanks to you too, Mags, for being, as always, a wonderful host and getting all this lovely juicy information from our wonderful guests. Just wanted to do a couple of little shout outs before we sign off. The first one being that the next career talk is going to be on hospitality. So anyone who is interested in that, do keep an eye out, because we're going to do something similar on that theme. And as you guys are saying, lots of jobs going there at the moment. So really important place to consider. And then the final thing to say was that for anyone in the UK who may not be aware, WSET has a jobs board on its website, jobs.wsetglobal.com, which I've just popped in the chat. So if anyone is actively looking, it's a good place to start. And that is it from me. So I will end the recording here.